Good morning. My name is John House, and I am the current beekeeper for looking after the bees at Buckingham Palace and Clarence House. And with me this morning is he was the old beekeeper, but he's now my consultant for the bees at the palace and etc. And his name is John House. Sorry, his name's
My name's John Chapple. You're John House.
That's
Get
true.
it right.
Sorry about nerves. Sorry about that, John.
That's all right.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to say John Chapple. That's terrible, isn't it? So, anyway, John, the roles that we find ourselves in the palace and the rest of it consist of looking, well, in the active season, we go to the palace and to Clarence House at least once a week, and we look at the bees there. In the palace, we've got, in the Buckingham Palace, we've got 4 colonies at the moment in there, and I've actually got some spare ones for the winter in there, a couple of spare nucleuses in case we lose a hive over the winter, and the same I've got 2 hives in Clarence House, and John's when I need help, which is quite not that often, but John's such an experienced beekeeper, and when he can, he sometimes comes with me and gives me some prompters to help me with that. I don't know, how do you, and also...
Well, I've been keeping bees at Buckingham Palace and Clarence House for about 15 years plus. Yeah. I can't tell you exactly when because the memory's going as well as the eyesight that's going. But I got to a stage when I couldn't, John has helped me in the last few years, but I got to a stage when I just couldn't cope on my own, if you like. So I've handed over the role to John, and I'm his apprentice now, or helper. But we thought that sounds a funny word to use, so we come up with the word consultant. It sounds very posh, doesn't it? But really, I'm just there to help John look after the bees in both these royal places. And it's a privilege to be able to keep my hand still in, because I'm finding I've got macular problems with my eyes, so it's very difficult for me to see what's going on, but I can still scream and shout and dig in my memory. If there's a little problem, I can help out with. And we've had a relationship now for, I don't know, 10 years plus, and it's worked very well.
Yeah, that's right. I get on very well with John, and it's really brought my own beekeeping skills, because on leaps and bounds by having an experience. There's no substitute for experience. You can read all the books you like, but having someone of John's experience is just I'm so lucky. I really am gifted. I met John 20 odd years ago when I first started beekeeping, and I met him on a holiday to the Czech Republic actually, and we've been friends ever since. And he lives about 7 miles from me, so we're not, that far apart. So I was wondering about what we could say about some stories we can say about the palace bees. Well, I suppose really you've had experience when you've indeed met a couple of people, but we're not allowed to say too much, are we? That's sort of like one of the secrets.
If we talk about it, we end up in the Tower of London, because we sign these magic bits of paper saying you mustn't say anything. So whatever we say, it's just general. We don't mean to be rude or hide anything. But I've had my knuckles rapped when the Duke of Edinburgh died, and as a tribute to him, like in all beekeeping world, when someone dies, you put a black ribbon around the hive and you say a prayer to the bees. But I got into an awful lot of trouble for doing this. So now I'm ultra cautious in what I say, because they let me off once. I don't know if they let me off twice, and I don't want to find out, because I don't want to end up in the Tower of London and John having to bake a cake for me and bring a file in and look after me. But for yarns, well, where do you start? The main thing I feel in Buckingham Palace, we didn't want the bees to swarm, especially when there's a garden party on or trooping the colour or anything. and honey was a secondary. So the main thing is to stop them swarming, which is quite a job with bees, as anyone who keeps bees knows. So we do our best, and touch wood, Mr. Thorne here. And we, by the way, we always use Thorne's woodwork. Just get a plug for Thorne, so we might get a discount now. Yeah, that's what we do. We just try and keep the swarming down. Honey is secondary, and all the honey that is produced there goes into the royal kitchens, and where it goes from then is a total mystery.
We try to prevent the swarming as much as possible, and one thing that we do run is we run normal national hives, but we run double broods, and there's obviously nothing's perfect. Whatever you do in beekeeping, I'm sure everyone back that up, but certainly occasionally you can not actually try to go check the bees in the palace, and for whatever reason you just can't get in the garden. Then there might be some event on or the rest of it, and we're just not privileged to that information. So one of the things I found is to have run double broods, and it means that the brood that's on the floor this year is in the spring we get the brood to hatch out of that and the rest of it, and hopefully the queen will be upstairs in the second one, and then we just put another brood on the top of that, and that becomes this year. So you're always trying to give the bees as fresh as new frames to keep them healthy as possible. That's one of the things, but also it gives room, and once obviously the bottom brood is all hatched out in early spring, we take that one away, and then what was the top box last year then becomes the box on the floor of the hive. So that's one of the things that is good, but obviously when we rock up sometimes we can't actually get in. There is a little bit of comfort in the fact that we've given them sufficient room. We hope that they won't need to they won't swarm. And the other thing that I find useful is that we've actually got an empty hive, which we call a bait hive for swarms, and we put that 30 meters away from the main hives. These are all on the island, by the way, in Buckingham Palace, which is a lovely area. But we put another hive 30 meters away, and with a few old frames in, so that should one of these hives swarm that we've got there, fingers crossed, they take a fancy to the bait hive and go in there, and obviously you've saved that from going off somewhere else. We're not immune. We have actually been we don't often get a swarm, but it's not unknown. We did get called once, and it turns out they weren't actually our bees. And as you approach Clarence House, there's the police officers there, and they've got sort of a double barrier gate system. Well, we had a swarm actually land on the gate, and I think, oh goodness me! But like all bees, so the police give her a ring. We arrived there, and unfortunately, the bees had left about 5 minutes before we got there. So that's that's the sort of thing that happens. But we think the swarm came from another beekeeper, because of course in London there's more bees than you can shake a stick at. I mean, for instance, I think that the Ritz Hotel has got bees on the roof now, so it could be from there. I don't know, from somewhere other place around there. But that was a bit of a shame that we missed that one. But it did alarm the police somewhat, because they couldn't open the barrier until the bees had disappeared. Right, and
well, can I add to that? You can see John's a young beekeeper because he talks metric, and I think, what's 30 meters?
Yeah.
And my brain still thinks in imperial.
That's true.
It's 30 meters or something like 25 yards away.
Yeah.
And the first thing that we do when we go there, we go to the bait hive, and we want to see if there's any activity outside it. And if we see bees beginning to go in there and nose around, we know then that one of the hives there is thinking about swarming. So then, instead of having a quick inspection, you have to do a longer inspection and look for the signs of queen cells or starting queen cells. So that's a good tip for new beekeepers. Have a bait hive somewhere, watch what's going on there. That gives you a clue that they might be swarming. No, in beekeeping, nothing's guaranteed, only the fact that bees know far more than you and I do, and they do their best.
Yeah. The other thing is, this year, it was really slow year to start with. I mean, no year's the same, but as we had a lot of rain this year, a lot of beekeepers are talking about it, and I was really worried that the bees were going to starve, and indeed I had to actually supplementary feed some of my colonies, but the ones in the palace, I was a bit nervous about, because we have a super on the rest of it, but you don't want to feed because it could risk going into your super. So I actually put a very small amount of candy on each one, because it's no guarantee, but the bees don't usually take the candy unless they absolutely need it, and they don't tend to take it down and store it. So certainly up until about mid-June, we didn't have anything coming in the hives at all, in both Clarence House or in Buckingham Palace. But it was like God threw a switch about mid-June, and of course there's an awful lot of lime trees and this sort of thing around, and that's what they were bringing in. Earlier than that, we had so much rain, and okay, I don't know where they find it. I mean, a lot of it's bramble we do get in. And I think it's because the flowers are upright, the nectar was getting flushed by the rain out of the blackberry flowers. So, hence you wouldn't have getting very little honey from them. So you got a bit, obviously you get a bit of pollen, which is like a whitish grey colour. But as soon as the lime came on stream, and we had the other thing we had coming in was the chestnut. Around that time, they got like a red. There's I think is it the edible chestnut? It's the edible one, isn't it?
Yeah, sweet chestnut.
Yeah. And so that came on stream, and as well around about the same time, and so then they really started filling up, and we were getting they were filling a super just in about sort of 7 to 10 days. And so that's the time when you really got to make sure that you have your supers ready to go on. Ideally, if you can, drawn ones. And if you do want to, you can, what I tend to do is I have a drawn frame, sometimes a new frame, and then a drawn frame, and the rest of it, I sort of stagger them, the rest of it. That way, you're always getting fresh frames in your supers, and which is a good thing, and also gives the bees a little bit of work to do as well. And I tend to like to work the bees hard, then they don't think about swarming, because at that stage. But once the flow's on, bees seldom swarm anyway. Do you find that, John?
Yeah, and I say the thing to be is the books you read or in the internet now, be very careful of how you interpret the knowledge they tell you, because most of the stuff is done on history of things. On the 1st of June you do this, the 2nd of August you do this. Really, you've got to watch the weather, and you've got to work with your bees, not against them. So when you see things happening, and you've got to be observant to the weather, and by that I mean the temperature, whether it's raining or not, and see what the bees are doing, and try and follow them, and if you really can, be one step ahead of the bees, which is not always possible. But my simplest way of giving them is give them work, and if in doubt, give them another super. You can never put too many supers on. The only problem with putting too many supers on is lifting them off if they ever get full. But that's another problem. Hopefully at the end of the year you can borrow step ladders from someone and take the supers off if they're that good. But really try and stop them swarming, and that was my number one consideration there all the time. I I will admit I probably did have a swarm, but I would never admit it publicly. But I did get called out when there was a function on there, and the bees, which weren't my bees, I can tell that because I know all my bees by name, so I know they weren't my bees, ending up in one of the light fittings inside the square inside the palace. So there was me up top of a ladder, and I'm not very good at heights, trying to get these bees out one of these lovely fancy old Victorian light fittings. And I had a sheet on the floor, and my brush banging them down, because you couldn't put a box there, you couldn't bang them, you couldn't do anything. Anyway, it was a bit of fun, and it was filmed, and if anyone digs that filming out, they can have a good laugh on me, because I made myself a real Charlie. But in the end, we got them out, and the palace was happy, and me swearing all the time, well, not swearing, but stated they weren't my bees. And as a beekeeper, you learn to never admit they're your bees if they swarm, because then you become liable for anything.
Yeah.
And I thought if I admit they're mine and they've done a lot of damage, they'll be after me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for new beekeepers, don't admit they're your bees, but always try and collect any swarm you can, whether they're yours or not. It's a duty as a beekeeper to collect swarms. There are lots of beekeepers who refuse to collect swarms. Well, they shouldn't be keeping bees, because they might not be your bees today, but they'll be your bees tomorrow. So, and we've got to work with the public, especially now with the problems that are coming on. We need the public on our side, and we need the public on our side now for spotting this Asian hornet that's coming, because maybe we haven't got it this year, maybe not next year, but sooner or later it's going to hit us all, and it's going to be a real problem. So beekeepers who pretend, no, we won't bother about it, we won't do anything, what do we want to go to a lecture for or anything? It's coming, and when it hits us, it's going to hit us hard. I was lucky, or unlucky, it depends what you like, to live through when Varroa arrived. And at that time, it took about half our membership disappeared because they couldn't cope. It's not that they weren't capable of coping, they just shut their eyes to the problem at the time. But now all new beekeepers live with Varroa and think nothing of it. And that's going to be hopefully the same with the hornet when it arrives. So assuming there's new beekeepers looking at this, go and find out as much as you can about this hornet, because it's going to hit you, and it'll hit you fast when it arrives. Because I know that the experts are saying that they've got it basically under control. That's what they think. Mother Nature tells me, and experience tells me, there are lots of hornets already in this country, just that we haven't found them. So we rely on the public to find them. What's your opinion on that, John?
Oh, I definitely think that the other thing is that there are some preconceptions at the moment that the hornet's a beekeeper problem. It isn't, believe you me. If the in France, it's really upset the balance of nature actually there, because the hornets become the top predator. So not only do they attack the honeybees, and they also eat all the other wild bees, all the other nice good insects that do good. They you know, I mean, having they will eat anything. I think they eat something like 11 kilos per colony of insects of all sorts. And so you can well imagine that, you know, all the other, you know, good insects that we have around that do lots of good stuff in nature, and, you know, even like butterflies and things, you know, and moths that do other pollination duties. Well, this hornet's taking those as well, and if you haven't got those, there'll be a lot of flowers and things that, you know, might not actually get pollinated at all, and you might lose those. Anyway, gonna have to nearly wrap up time. I've got probably a load more stuff that we can talk about, but I'd like to say thank you very much for listening, and I say goodbye. Thank you very much. And the honey show, there'll be more videos for the honey show throughout the next 3 days. I hope you get to watch those as well. Thank you.